So, how's your mind been, man?
It's so interesting. I was kind of triggered just now, like, things not going well, and I'm just gonna keep it 100 here. Like usually when I get triggered, I have this very bad addiction, which is like, looking at porn and stuff like that. And it's so interesting, like, I kind of like the urge is so strong, but once I finish my stuff, like once I get whatever, and then suddenly the craving just goes away. Like it's like from 100 to 0 so quickly. And I was just sitting there, like really fascinated by how the craving works, I guess. Like the mind just so weird, like just, I mean, I'm just satisfied. I'm satisfied that I got my things done and the temptation just goes away. So I'm not, I don't know. So my mind's kind of fascinated right now. I'm just fascinated by seeing how strange my mind can be. So yeah.
Yeah, it's a natural phenomenon, you know. That's how men are. They got these things that they got to deal with, and it's actually it's a kind of a good practice because once you're done, you have that clarity, you know. And the clarity's like, oh, that was just a biological function. I'm all good now, you know? It's there for a reason, that biological function. You don't have to look at it as anything bad or immoral or be disgusted or this or that. It's a natural phenomenon. It's like scratching an itch on yourself. Once you get an itch, you scratch it, and then you move on. Hey, Michael, how's it going?
Oh, it's going well. How are you guys doing?
Thank you for coming, Michael.
Oh, thank you for hosting.
Oh, yes. Hey, Thomas, how's it going, dude?
I'm good, thank you.
We were just talking about dudes whacking off. And how it's a natural phenomenon and not anything to feel guilty. What were you saying?
No, I was going to say, I'm not sure if I came at the right time, but that's fun, isn't it? So.
Yep, you came just at the right time. Talking about.
What's funny is I was just talking to someone else about dudes being whacked off by their Zen masters, with the Zen stick.
Dude, that's hilarious.
So some kind of synchronicity happening.
Yeah. But Ivan had a good point. He was talking about like how after a dude does it, then you feel clarity. And like you kind of see, I was telling him how you kind of see it's a natural function and nothing to be ashamed of. And it's part of being a man. And like everything else in life, it's no different than other thoughts, feelings, or emotions that arise naturally. If we cling to them, they'll cause dukkha. If we let go of them, we'll be free of dukkha.
Yeah. I just want to add one more thing. It's just really interesting because I didn't really give into that action, right? Usually my addiction was triggered because I was stressed out, and once I finished my stuff, the craving just goes away. I didn't even have the urge to do it. So I'm just fascinated, really, just like how quick it comes and go. I don't know. I don't know. Yeah, that's it.
What do you think about that, Michael?
I would say there's a more let's say there's a different way of looking at it as well, which relates to the metaphor that you gave like a month ago, I think, Dhammarato, which I think is one of the best metaphors. You said, think about the type of kid you would want to babysit, If you are asked to babysit someone's kid, and that kid is super needy, clingy, whiny, restless, can't be satisfied. You know, you give it one activity, it gets bored, it wants another activity. You feed it, it doesn't like the food, it wants other food. You know, just think of the most spoiled, obnoxious, dissatisfied child. You don't want to be around that child. And then contrast that with like the kid, the way you said it was funny, but you know, like who's just happy to be there, you know, doesn't need anything, doesn't need an iPad, doesn't need the television, doesn't need anything at all. It's just a happy, satisfied kid. Maybe it was raised by parents who loved it no matter what, whatever, you know, I don't know what the conditions might be for that, but let's just say there's a kid who's perfectly satisfied. So that kid's not pestering you or pressuring you, or you'll be able to relax around that kid, right? And you know, in the suttas, the Buddha discusses the relationship between the different aspects of mind in this way. He talks about the chitta as being like a wild animal. You know, I'm comparing it to a kid here. And he says it's the chitta, which is the lower mind, the more emotional, sort of primitive aspect of our mind that is afflicted by the defilements, that's intoxicated by craving. And the more we give that craving monster what it wants, the more it wants, essentially. The more you feed craving, and then as soon as you try to cut it off, it tortures you with pestering. I want. It makes you feel shitty. It puts all this pressure on you. And then the thoughts you have and the sense of self that you have is an image projected onto you by that lower mind. And so, you know, you're never able to relax because that part of the mind always wants something to do, always needs something to be entertained. It's just perpetually dissatisfied. You know, so in the traditional approach, in the Pali Suttas, you know, that's the practice of virtue is a practice of restraining the chitta, restraining craving like you would a wild animal. You know, the Buddha compares it as of tying an animal to a post until its wildness is tamed and it's able to relax. And then when it's able to, you know, the same thing with the suttas where the Buddha's, or the simile of walking the elephant through the square, where you have to, you know, kind of keep correcting it, but once it's out in the field where it's grazing happily, then you can relax. So a tame chitta, a tame sort of lower mind, in modern scientific terms, we could say it's the what they call the reptile brain, even like the reptile brain plus the mammalian brain, as they say in modern cognitive science. We can use that framework if we want. And then the mana would be like the intellect or even metacognition, although I think metacognition is more sati, but it's that aspect of mind that we use to train the lower mind. And seeing that craving has no end, that it can't be satisfied, that giving craving what it wants only leads to more craving, just like giving a child what it wants just leads to a more and more spoiled, dissatisfied child. That's an early insight in the path. Especially if you just focus on taking away the objects of craving, right? If you take away 100 objects of craving, most people don't, but they'll take away like a certain handful, right? It'll just create new objects. It'll create new ideas to chase. It'll create new life pursuits, new spiritual pursuits. And it always knows exactly what to put in front of you in order to get you to take the bait, essentially. You know, that's why, you know, people who sort of try to practice restraint are oftentimes sort of like changing their mind about that restraint. They're like, but if you go directly to craving itself and you see craving for what it is, this perpetually dissatisfied demon that's essentially possessed the mind, it's the way I like to think of it, and you just like put your foot down and don't feed it anything at all, eventually it will kind of get so hungry from lack of fueling that it'll grow very weak and it'll sort of go to a state of rest. And then at that point, the mind will become sober. It will no longer be intoxicated by the pressures and intoxications of this infection of craving. And that's when the mind becomes clear enough to see things as they are. And if the mind becomes clear enough to see things as they are, it's profoundly enough at a deep enough level to where it gets into the lower mind, that's when certain fetters can be broken and certain patterns of behavior won't re-arise. But often what happens instead is we get it to the point where it sort of takes a rest, think that we're okay, and then go back to our normal habits, and then all of the problems come back. They all resurface because all it kind of did was give up for a little while. Like if you're training a puppy, which I'm doing right now, and you're not consistent with the training, then you won't get the behavioral outcomes that you want, essentially. So, the early part of the path in the traditional sense, which is different than the way we typically talk about it here, I think. Although I've kind of adapted a little bit in the way that I talk about it here, but it's to completely starve craving, to understand that there's no end to its dissatisfaction. And the traditional sense restraint approach works, like especially if you're forced. Like for me, when I went to Wat Suan Mook and I sat there not able to speak, not able to eat more than once a day, not able to do any of the things that I was feeding my senses, and felt like extreme withdrawals from the stimulation I was used to. It feels like going into rehab, like you're having withdrawals from a drug. That for me, I was forced into that, and that gave me a perspective that I can go back to and try to kind of base my practice on that. But typically in the modern society, we have a hard time trusting that sense restraint will lead to what we're looking for in the path, because we're still in the mind that believes that doing things to get things to feel good or feel better is a valuable thing to do. There's a certain point where that mind of craving, which is the mind that thinks that that believes the narrative that if I do this or get this or become this, then I will be happy. That's sort of like the sentence I'd like to use to illustrate the mind afflicted by craving. If we still have that mentality, nothing can really be seen clearly, so you have to get to the point where you see that very way of thinking as the cause of your suffering, that all of your pain that you experience is the pain that craving is inflicting on you in order to do what it wants you to do. So when you want to jerk off, like you guys were talking about, that painful feeling of being horny and uncomfortable is a feeling that craving is torturing you with in order to get you to do what it wants you to do. When you can't sit still in an empty room and just be happy sitting there, and you have to get up and do something, that sense of pain that we call boredom is a pain that craving is inflicting on you to get you to get up and go do something. You start to see that every single thought, word, and action that you do is motivated by this slaver that is constantly pressuring you with painful feeling to get you, and then you identify with it. You think, you identify with your desires, you identify with all of the narratives that are built on your desires, and it's a whole world that's built by this fundamental process. And it's until you see that and become completely disenchanted with that thing itself, that's like a very big crux in the path. But to bring it back to, in the way that I think Dhammarato helps us hack that process a little bit, is going back to the same framework of the child and the parent, as he says, the chitta being the child and the parent being the mano. I like to call it gaslighting the defilements. Craving says, I'm not satisfied, I want this. You say, no, actually, it's okay. Everything's okay exactly as it is, So instead of like a warrior mentality of like disciplining and taming the animal, we take on like a nurturing parent mentality, and we gaslight and subdue it with nurturing thoughts. You're actually okay. Everything's fine exactly, because the ultimate truth is much closer to the statement that everything is okay exactly as it is. The untruth is, if I do this, I'll feel good. If I get that, I'll feel good or feel better. That's the lie. So there's different ways of doing the same thing, but fundamentally that thing is to break break our enslavement to this creature that lives inside us that the Buddha called craving, who is constantly dictating everything we think, say, and do, everything we see, and the whole way we see the world is dictated by it. And you have to restrain it to the point of almost being broken completely before you can actually see clearly, before you can see what's actually happening, as Ajahn Chah would say, seeing what's what. So that would be my perspective on it.
I think it's interesting what you say, because it's my exact lived experience of all of these things. Like, and I'm sure we're all the same, aren't we? Like, it's not just a theory that the Buddha put forward that we can we need to believe in, but at least I'll speak for myself, but I've had that experience of giving something up, and suddenly it becomes easier and easier to not do it, whatever that thing is, until you crack. And then one day you crack, and then suddenly you've stirred the beast again, and then suddenly the craving is just becomes immense, and it's because you've sort of given in, and I just said you haven't fully kind of I can't remember exactly how you described it now, but it's still kind of there bubbling under the surface. Mm-hmm. But you've tamed it, but you haven't fully tamed it to the point where it won't ever, I guess, enlightenment or whatever that is at that point where it cannot be stirred anymore. I think that's correct. I'm not sure in terms of what enlightenment is, but yeah, the idea that it's been what's the word they use, it's been cooled, it's been entirely exhausted. There's another word that I've seen in the suttas.
Quenched, extinguished.
Extinguished. There you go. It's been extinguished.
Nirvana.
Yeah. And so for me at least, I'm not at that point yet. So I can give it up. And then suddenly I'm like, I've given up stuff. And I've told friends, oh my God, I thought this was a big deal. I thought it was so hard to give it up. And then I'll be like, wait, I've given this up for the last 1 or 2 months, and and then, maybe it's difficult at the beginning, and then suddenly you're like, oh, it's really easy. And you're like, I don't even have this problem anymore. And then of course you just think, whatever, I don't know, for whatever reason you crack once and you think, well, it won't do any harm because I've given it up anyway, so I'll just do it once. And then suddenly you're then caught up in this loop again. And then all of that, those fires are, that fire is burning inside you, and it's anything but extinguished. So yeah, anyway, I find that really, certainly everything you were sharing very much aligned with my own lived experience. I think also, again, I stayed at Watsu and Moke earlier this year as well, and I didn't do a retreat. I stayed on the that's right, yeah. And I planned to stay there for 4 days, and I did 2 days, and I just couldn't hack it. Like, I'm a reasonably experienced meditator. I've done it for quite a few years. I've done retreats before, but the experience for me was just too hot. It was too uncomfortable. I couldn't find anywhere to sit and get comfortable, and it was a really difficult experience for me. And I just think I'm not saying that someone else wouldn't get a lot from it, but it was too much at that time. Yeah. And I ended up leaving after a couple of days. And I find, I think Dhammadasa, you've talked a lot about this, like, just, and also Dhammarato, but like, just finding an easier, more joyful way to practice, and that can be different for everyone, right? But I've started, just to give you an example, I had this really bad habit where I'd check first thing in the morning my phone, and now what I'm trying to do is sit with a nice cup of coffee and just sit, and then meditate as well, but then just breaking up that kind of cycle I had. Now, probably an elite meditator would say, well, you don't even need the coffee. You can just sit and whatever. But for me, at this stage in where my practice is, having a nice, I've got a nice coffee machine, have a really nice latte in the morning, and sit there and enjoy it and not read the newspaper, not watch YouTube, none of that. That feels like progression for me, and it's actually joyful, and it's something I look forward. So I've replaced the really bad habit, the distraction, with something that's a lot more joyful and pleasant, and yet also doesn't feel it's not a distraction to the extent that I was distracted before. So it feels wholesome, even if it's not probably as extreme as some people might go to break free of their craving and whatnot, but it feels like a step in the right direction. So I feel like just generally this Sangha it's all about making steps in the right direction, right, and then building on them rather than saying that everything has to be super extreme and you have to be you have to go and give everything up and live in a monastery and have no possessions and whatever, which some people are ready for and others aren't, and maybe never will be, and maybe that's okay. Maybe you don't need that, right, to be joyful and free of craving.
I'll
Yeah.
say or do you want to go, Buddhadasa?
Oh no, go ahead, brother.
I was just going to say, I'll just say two quick things in response to that are different in a way. Like one, your experience at Swan Muk where the body couldn't get comfortable, it was too hot and all that stuff. There's an opportunity there to grow disenchanted with the body and put it down, to put the body down, because it's this creature that's hot and sweaty and can't be satisfied, and I'm just gonna put it down, and that's a level of freedom. But to the rest that you said, Dhammarato speaks to this well, and when I understood what he was saying, I got it. He said that the way I would put it is that oftentimes the practice of renunciation is done ignorantly. And because it's done ignorantly, like not knowing what the purpose really is, because it's not about the cup of coffee, it's not about the pastry. And if we do it ignorantly, then we do it and resent it, and we create more suffering from it. To approaching renunciation, or let's say restraining the objects of craving, approaching it with more wisdom is beneficial, with more nurturing and things like that. So that's what I'll say to that for now. I put my daughter down for a nap, and it sounds like she didn't go to sleep, so I'm gonna go and check on her
go
real
ahead,
quick.
dude. Yeah, my son's just chilling.
I don't know if you guys can hear her. She's calling me.
I'm
just gonna mute myself.
Sure.
But like you were saying, Thomas, a lot of the I guess I'll say militant style meditation retreats and such are really helpful, especially because, are you familiar with the story of Jetson Milarepa, the Tibetan yogi?
No.
His master, long story short, his master had him build a giant tower out of stone, a very large tower. He had him build it because his student Milarepa, he wanted to become enlightened. He wanted to learn from this great master, Marpa, the translator. So he had Milarepa build a giant tower, and he would have to get just the right stones. He would build it. The master would come and say, "This is horrible. Redo it. Start over. Take it down. Start over." And he did this basically, I don't know how many times, 15 something times or something like that, until Milarepa just cracked. And the whole time, Marpa the translator was seeming very militant and mean. When you read the biography, you can see that Marpa the translator in secrecy would be weeping because he was treating him so poorly. But he knew that it was something that had to be done, to get through to this guy that you don't really need a teacher. You don't really need rules, more rules. You don't really need yet another thing in the future to chase after like a dog. Once he stopped building that gigantic tower and he could let his wounds heal and his body rest, you learn to appreciate the present moment as it is, not going after some insane ideal that we create in our minds. Milarepa then could see, after stopping building this hellish tower, well, he built it, but then he finally stopped after he cracked. And he could see that, man, life is beautiful just as it is. He didn't even care about enlightenment. He didn't even care about all these things. And ironically, that's the enlightenment, is being satisfied with the way things are. So when you go to these retreats and it's hard, there's a couple ways to look at it as a student. You could go to a retreat and be meditating and eating little and doing all this stuff, the classical sitting meditation anyway. And after a period, most people they'll stay a couple of days and they'll say, fuck this shit. And then you have the opposite end of the spectrum where people just stay and they believe themselves to be this unbelievable yogi master. But then you have the middle way of people who can see the worth in it and realize that it's not about how you do things, the way you sit, how long you sit. It's about, are you satisfied right where you are, right where you sit, with whatever you may be doing, work, play, or otherwise, you know? But the Western mindset, it's very hard to get the students to see, you don't need a teacher. You don't need more rules on top of the rules you've already been given. You need the rules between your own ears. That's really just a fun play of gladdening the mind here and now. That's what all of this is about. It comes down to one thing and one thing only, dukkha, dukkha nirodha. And people say, well, the Buddha said this, well, the Buddha said that. I trust that the Buddha said dukkha, dukkha nirodha and freedom through the Noble Eightfold Path. I trust Dhammarato in his rendering of the teaching. I trust Buddhadasa Bhikkhu. So in a way, I don't even need the Pali Canon or different translations from thousands of years ago. I know that Buddhadasa Bhikkhu is a real person. You can read his writings, you can listen to Dhammarato talk, and you can test these practices for yourself, these actions. And what is it? The action of gladdening the mind here and now when this thing gets into a thunderstorm. We call the mind, when the thoughts, feelings, and emotions mess with us. We take shelter in the Buddha, the Dhamma, the Sangha, aka the Noble Eightfold Path. Until what? Until the storm of the mind subsides, like all things in nature and reality. Right? Whether it be boredom, whether it be elation, whether it be all these things. They're just passing phenomena. We take them personally as they arise, but there's no need to take them personally or even seriously.
So I think to come back also to what Michael said about how if you do renunciation in an ignorant way, what you're going to do is you're going to go into these militant style environments, but you're going to do it with this boot camp style mentality, right? Like as if you were, going to a fitness camp or something, where your main motivation for doing it is some kind of future goal, whether that be losing weight or whatever it might be. And so, yeah, it's interesting how you can do that. And then you can have these experiences through gritted teeth, thinking you're making progress because you're like, one more day to go. I'm almost done with this and I'm going to come out of here a better man. But in reality, of course, you're just practicing ignorantly. You're not satisfied because you're not satisfied. So yeah, I see where you guys are coming from. I've got a quick question for you both, actually, Michael and Dhammadasa. You both have young kids, I understand. So what's that like? How does that affect your practice?
Michael, if you want to go first, you can.
It's up to you. This is a topic that is close to my heart, obviously, and the chair of the department where I work at the university wants me to write a book about this topic, actually, because I talk about it a lot. Because it's prolific, it's ubiquitous, it's an infection in Buddhism and other contemplative traditions to feel that family is like an obstacle. I hear this everywhere. You know, most Buddhists are young single men or monks, male monastics, and the history of Buddhism is told from a male monastic perspective for the most part. And there's a lot of like fear and animosity towards family life, I feel. And I think that this is a like a stupidity for the most part. Well, geez, where do I start? Well, the reason that this person has asked me to write a book about this topic is because she's a Buddhist and she has felt that having kids has been an obstacle to her goal in the practice. I have another friend.
I love the fact you're right on cue.
I have a friend who has two beautiful daughters. She lived on a 10-acre property with her husband. She got super into the Dhamma, and she's a great person. And you know, she goes to Abhayagiri on a regular basis, very close to the monks. And I'm like, how much of this should I say? Because I don't want people to triangulate. But anyway, she shaved her head. She divorced her husband, and she spends a lot of time now complaining to the abbot of that monastery that she regrets having kids because they're keeping her from renunciation, essentially. So I think it's a huge problem. But just to make a long story short, because you guys know I can be really long-winded, and then I also have trouble thinking when my kids are around, is if the Dhamma, as the Buddha says in Majjhima Nikaya 8, is about effacement, he says that he doesn't teach jhana. He said jhana he teaches as a pleasant abiding here and now. What he teaches is effacement, which is the rubbing out of self. As Buddhadasa puts it, the ending of selfishness. So,
Hi, little one.
if you feel that having children is a problem, then who feels that? Your own selfishness feels that. So what are you choosing to feed in that situation? You're choosing to feed your selfishness, which I said, as I was mentioning earlier, craving is synonymous with selfishness. You know, self arises from craving. You know, what we call ourselves is just a projection of craving. And I'm worried she's going to fall off this trampoline. It's an adult trampoline she's standing on. So when, let's say you're trying to lose weight, you're, you know, heavily overweight, you're obese, the doctors tell you that you need to lose weight. And you're saying, okay, I'm going to stop eating slices of cake and I'm going to stop eating fries in my car. As many food addicts, myself included, like to do, eat in the car.
I'm never stopping.
But you stopped eating slices of cake and you stopped binging on fries in your car, but now you're eating like, you know, super massive bowls of ice cream at night right before you go to bed. You're still eating all these other things. You know, that's what happens when you renounce objects of craving, like children, for example. Like people, even, you know, which the idea of renouncing your children is just an external renunciation. It's trying to get rid of something that you want to get away from, which is the other side of craving, wanting to do things to feel good or feel better, wanting to get rid of things that make you feel bad. That's the two heads of craving, essentially. And feeding craving is feeding that selfishness that the Dhamma is about overcoming. Children give you an opportunity to restrain your selfishness. It's an opportunity to strengthen strengthen the Dhamma, because when you have kids, and Dhammadasa probably knows this, a lot of your primitive conditioning comes to the surface. There's like primordial drives that come to the surface. There's childhood traumas that come to the surface. there's all kinds of stuff. And so it's an opportunity to stop being selfish and to restrain your craving. I mean, putting on robes and going out into a forest and not having to work for your money or do anything for a child or to be inconvenienced in the slightest. Like for me, that would be easy peasy. I would have no trouble doing that. You know, I think that my craving would probably stay hidden pretty easily in that situation because I love sitting alone in the forest, and having kids is really, really difficult. So yeah, I mean, I have more thoughts on the topic, but that's I think having kids is an opportunity to go further in the Dhamma because it gives you an opportunity to transcend selfishness essentially and to restrain craving a lot because you have to kind of put them first.
Interesting. Yeah.
It's also a lesson in uncontrollability. I mean, you don't know what kind of kids you're going to get. You don't know if they're going to be medically complex in some way or if, you know, whatever, you know, you don't know if they're going to die 2 weeks after they're born or, you know, get cancer or, you know, grow up to be addicted to drugs or whatever. You have no idea. You know, it really reveals the truth of uncontrollability, you know, impermanence, unsatisfactoriness. There's a whole lot of opportunities to drive the Dhamma deeper into the heart when you have kids, if you hold it the right way, in my opinion.
What about the argument that like you're just making things a bit more, things are a bit more challenging for yourself. Like, you know, you can impact your environment to an extent, right? And sitting in a forest, you know, we've all been on retreats, and when you're on retreat, it feels so much easier to let things go because you don't have distractions around you. Whereas obviously with kids, and it's brilliant actually, the timing that your daughter
she just started walking and talking, so this is fun. But anyway, go on.
Yeah, she's gorgeous, huh? But yeah, like I guess so. I'm really, really interested to hear your thoughts on this because
I think where you were going with that is you know, like it's a more conducive environment to be in a monastic setting or in a retreat setting.
Yeah.
What do we hear Ajahn Chah bragging about? Making life as difficult as possible for the monks so that they can't be complacent about where craving finds a place to hide, where the defilements find a place to hide. Why does Ajahn Buddhadasa make us sleep on concrete slabs with a straw mat and a wooden pillow at Wat Suan Mok? Why does he make us meditate outside where the mosquitoes are constantly biting you? You know, because if you know, this is a little different than the angle that I think Dhammadasa is coming from with a bit more of a Zen perspective. But if you're looking at the opportunity to put down the body, you really have to see how much of a burden the body is. You know, I did a yoga retreat after I lived in Thailand. Not a yoga retreat. I did yoga teacher training in India after I lived in Thailand for a couple of years, and I'm probably the only person in the group that heard the yoga teacher say this, but because it went right over everybody's head. But there's this thing called shat karma in yoga, which is like all of these cleansing techniques, right? Like swallowing cloths and taking it out to get the mucus out of your stomach, and like eating this mixture of like lemon and other stuff I can't remember anymore, and then it flushes out your system with certain postures and you poop out all of the toxins and all kinds of stuff. There's a whole bunch of shat karmas. Everybody's like, ooh, I feel so clean, blah blah blah. And the guru says to us, and I swear nobody heard him, he says to us, but ultimately the point of shat karma is to realize that no matter what you do to the body, it's just going to go back to being unclean again. So you can become disenchanted with the body. You know, so it's not about cleaning out the body and getting pure and clean. It's about seeing the body as it is. You know what I mean? Because the chitta or the subconscious, whatever we want to call it, is what gives us our sense of self. It's like how our children watch us, and we model our satisfaction or our dissatisfaction to them, and we're doing that to the lower mind all the time. But the image you have of yourself in your mind is a mentally constructed entity. It's a self-image, right? So Bhante Punjabi has this joke that I don't know if it works anymore because we're so used to seeing pictures of ourselves, but he would say that Sakaya Ditti is this solid self-image that we have, but that's not who we are. When somebody gives you a picture of yourself, you look at the picture and you say, that's not me, you know, because it doesn't match the image you have of yourself. Like I said, these days we see so many pictures of ourselves that our self-image might actually match the pictures, but that used to be a thing. So contemplating the many parts of the body, the uncleanliness of the body, subjecting the body to all of its discomforts and becoming sort of fed up with the fact that the body can't be settled. What it does is it breaks down that image of solidity that the mind has of itself as the body, essentially. Sakaya Ditti is this image of permanence in the body, because the mind looks for something to identify as itself, so it takes the body as itself because the body appears to be permanent and solid. But as you know, the Bhikkhuni Soma says to Mara when he comes to visit her, she says this body is conventionally called a creature, but really it's only called that in the same way that a chariot, which is just an assemblage of parts, when they're put together, we designate it as chariot. You know, the body is an assemblage of parts. In modern, thought, it's a composition of systems and processes. But we think of it as solid. Whether we're educated or not, we still take the body to be this solid entity that is who and what we are. But if we can train the mind to see the body as it is, as this system of processes that is governed by principles that we have no control over, then that breaks down our identification with the body. That's one way of breaking it down. The other thing is like, okay, you're at Swanmukh, you're hot, the mosquitoes are biting you, you can't sit still. You look at the body as this organism and environment, or this animal in nature, however you want to look at it, that can't be satisfied, and you just put it down, and you gain this sense of distance between you and the body. Like the early parts of the path are quite dualistic, right? You distance yourself from the body, you distance yourself from the chitta, you're in the mano, which is the intellect that's doing the practice. But eventually you get to the point where even that is seen to be an empty process that's governed by natural principles. I'll just say it that way right now, where the impossibility of owning or controlling any of this disrupts the delusion that you can find satisfaction in what it is and what it has to offer in terms of sensuality. And then craving gets undermined and eviscerated, and it's like that child that wouldn't stop nagging you doesn't nag you anymore. And the child itself is liberated of its dissatisfaction, and then you're at peace because it's no longer nagging you. This is just me putting it into language that is very pluralistic in the way it sounds, but I'll just, it really is a pluralistic process. It's not only dualistic, it's pluralistic until a certain point. So anyway, I think I went down a little bit of a mental rabbit hole there, but hopefully I answered your question about parenting.
Yeah.
You don't have any kids, do you?
No, I'm still no, not married yet.
Kidless, huh? Cool. How about you,
Yeah.
Thomas? I'm assuming you don't.
I'm a serial uncle, so I've got 11 nephews and nieces, and so that's part of the reason I ask is because I just see how busy my siblings are with their kids, like constantly. my sister's got 4 kids and they're just all over the place, you know. And so that's part of the reason. And I'm now, compared to like six months ago, I'm now in a more serious relationship. And so, you know, that's the sort of thing that is kind of a bit more possibly on the cards one day. And I'm you know, and I'm open to it. I'm not against it. I'm just, you guys are kind of role models in that sense, because you're not the typical you know, Buddhist sort of leader who's obviously childless and might talk about it. So it's interesting to get your perspective for that.
Yeah, it doesn't matter if you have kids, don't have kids. If you have kids, I would only say it's from a moral standpoint, and you just have to love them and have good sila, you know, make sure that you take care of your responsibilities. And if you don't, then you don't really have much responsibility other than eating some food and drinking some water. But, you know, have you ever heard of Ramana Maharshi, the Indian saint? Oh, he had a student called Papaji, and he was a very devout student. And he would go up to Ramana and he would say, you know, I'll give up my whole family. I'll leave my wife. I'll leave my kids. Only if you take me. Only if you take me as your student. Then if you do that, I'll give up all this stuff. And Ramana just looked at him. He's like, "You're so dumb, dude." He's like, "You don't have to give up all that stuff. You got to take care of your family." And that's why I really enjoy outside opinions from particularly not all, but some Indian saints, because they kind of do what a lot of people who are stuck in the Theravada and Zen mumbo jumbo kind of can't. They speak plainly, and they're not tied to, wait, but isn't it a Buddhist thing that we shouldn't have kids? Isn't this? They're free from that. And that freedom is a very good example of how a true Dhamma practitioner should be. A lot of people, they make comparisons. Should I have kids? Should I not have kids? Should I wear shoes? Should I mix all of my food together in a pot and eat it? Should I ask for this? Should I do this correctly? It's all bullshit. Are you satisfied? You don't need somebody to say, oh, now you're on the path to enlightenment now that you don't have kids. Or now you're on the path to enlightenment that you do have kids. It's just another thing in life that's a natural occurrence that may or may not happen for you. And if people are obsessing about how I should do things, and it just means you're new to the practice. Once you get a little practice under your belt, once you're seasoned, you don't make these distinctions of liking and disliking, being and becoming. If you want to be a monk, go for it. But there are particular guidelines you should follow out of respect, if anything. If you do join a monkhood or a temple or a wat or something. But if not, you know, you're not obligated by the only rules that govern you are the rules you make for yourself. And if you're interested in getting rid of dukkha, the rules should just be very simple of morality and gladdening the mind here and now, you know?
And do you still find time to meditate? Or is that, I mean, just from a pure practicality perspective, you know, you're waking up, you've got that added thing in your life. It's not, you know, it's not just your work and your whatever else. It's also you looking after a child. Does that affect you?
Real meditation is not the classical meditation viewpoint. Classical meditation viewpoint is I need to set aside 20 minutes to go sit in a room or a cave in the lotus or half lotus position, or sit staring at a wall, or go for a walking meditation. These are the kind of incorrect ways of doing meditation or looking at meditation. The more correct way would be that if we're practicing sati, if we're practicing remembering to see if there's dissatisfaction, and if there is, making the change of breathing and relaxing here and now, that is actual meditation. That's what everybody refers to when they talk about meditation, but their understanding of it is a little misguided. You can sit, you can do walking meditation, you can prostrate before gods and goddesses if you want to. All of these can be forms of real sati. And the point is to try to get that real sati going and put aside these ideas of setting aside times to do very specific kind of rituals, superstitious rituals. But it can be beneficial. But if you view that solely as sati, that would kind of be a obscured way of looking at it. Real sati, real meditation is breathing and relaxing and finding joy in whatever life may throw at you, good or bad. It's going beyond good and evil, going beyond liking and disliking. We remember that if a storm comes in our mind that doesn't feel good, that dissatisfies us, we take refuge in the breath here and now and breathe and relax here and now as it arises. You know, that's real meditation. So to say, does this disrupt that? Nothing in life could ever disrupt that, unless you have a wrong view about what meditation is. Then, yeah, if I don't have an extra, I was going to go for a walking meditation, but today my kid's sick, so now I can't. In that regard, it would, but that would be a very ignorant way of looking at meditation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Interesting perspective. Yeah.
And ignorance is the nutrients for the soil of dukkha. But correct understanding, wisdom, these things help us see that all things are anicca, dukkha, anatta, not worth holding on to too tightly.
Yeah.
And making imaginary rules and rituals for ourselves is just superstitious nonsense. Wherever you go, whatever you do, you can practice meditation, which is just breathing and relaxing. Oh, I feel good. That's all. Not complicated. And that's the teaching, is to undo the way that you've been, not you particularly, but in general, people have been brainwashed to view Dhamma practice. And that's why Dhammarato is a very good teacher, because he shows us more the correct way of what the Buddha is saying, gets away from the superstitions, gets away from the bad habits, gets away from even the cultural ties that they have. That kind of sometimes, not always, but sometimes can be limiting in our practice. And what is the practice? It's getting rid of dukkha. It's or not getting it rid, but not being attached to dukkha, not having a problem whether dukkha is there or not. Seeing the dukkha, gladdening the mind here and now, coming to the Dhamma, the truth. The truth is that everything's okay right now. Whatever may be happening, everything's always okay right now. Yeah, but what if this happens? What if I have a bill? Then you try to solve the physical problem in the physical world, and you breathe and relax and do the best you can. Yeah, but what about this? What about that? There's nothing you can throw at someone that's not like, yeah, but what if someone you love dies? Then I will weep and I will have sorrow, maybe for years, and that's perfectly fine. There's nothing you can throw at somebody that the Noble Eightfold Path won't help to heal, won't help to free you from. It'll free you from all dukkha. But you get dukkha, let's say if somebody dies and you say, no, I can't mourn. I'm a Buddhist. I shouldn't have feelings or thoughts or emotions. That's ignorance. Yeah. I shouldn't watch porn. I shouldn't do this. That's ignorance. I should watch porn. And then it goes both ways. You get addictions that are bad, and you have aversions to them that are bad, and they're both causing dissatisfaction. You don't see it. The better way would just be the middle way. Whatever may be, may be. And we don't intend to hurt anybody, so there's no bad karma or anything that we're going to create. We're just relaxing. But go ahead, Ivan, what were you saying?
Oh, no, I just want to quickly say, yeah, because people are still attached to, aversion to attachment, and yeah, I just want to quickly say, like, there's this yogi monk there who I really respect. That he also like have children. Like for the first few years, he realized that he's very attached to his children, and then he realized what's wrong. And then at some point, he was like, wait, I'm attached to not being attached. And then suddenly he's free. But yeah, everything you described just kind of reminds me of that. Like, people are attached to not being certain way. But yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, and these are all just guidelines. They're not rigid rules. Only you can look inside yourself and read the book between your own ears and heart and say, what am I doing? Is this causing me satisfaction or isn't this? And that's a very tough question that not many people seem to have the ability to do. It's very simple and easy, though. But I'm going to read this book, but I'm going to go to this teacher, but I'm going to see this guy. You're here now. These teachers ain't with us right now. We are. Are we satisfied or aren't we? If we're not, we make a change. That change usually is our attention and our attitude. Whatever may happen, we have a good attitude. Whatever may happen, we breathe and relax. Very simple practice. It's not a practice of philosophy or metaphysics. It's a practice of breathing and relaxing, and that's it. Cooling the mind down.
Yeah, it's so interesting, like, because everything you say, it sounds really easy and simple for me now, but looking back, maybe 6-7 months or a year ago, like, it's really hard. Like, it's like it just bounces off for some reason, you know. But now it's like, yeah, I understand what you're saying completely.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very simple, but it's so simple. It's you can miss it, like a butterfly in like a bouquet of flowers or something.
Yeah. You know, sometimes I caught myself talking to people, like, you know, with good intention. I sometimes, like, a bit mindless maybe. I just say something like, you know, like, you're okay right now. Why can't you just be happy right now? And, you know, the look on people's face, and then I just realized, wait, oh yeah, like, maybe it's hard to understand, and so I keep my mouth shut again. I mean, it's not like they're not angry or anything. They're just confused. Like, what does that mean? And then it's almost like I'm looking at my past self. I was like, wow, that's used to be me. And then I just, okay, like, wow, it's so simple, huh? But it's really hard to understand.
The brain by its nature is never going to be fully satisfied. But we have to realize we are not the brain.
Yeah.
We are not only the biology. It's a part of us, but it's not the only thing. It's a passing phenomenon. And its nature is to desire. Its nature is to have dukkha and satisfaction. But our true self is the pure satisfaction. That no matter what happens in the mind, if there's dukkha or no dukkha, we're satisfied with whatever. But on that note, if you guys have anything else to say before we go, let's hear it before we depart.
I'll try to keep this real short. I just wanted
go ahead,
to
dude.
tie into what you were saying in relation to what Thomas asked earlier about his siblings who are parents and quite busy. The difference between children becoming more of an obstacle to being satisfied, or, you know, obtaining in the Dhamma, or however you want to frame it, and children being an opportunity to be more successful in the Dhamma is exactly the same as in any other external circumstances. It's what Dhammadasa is talking about. It's all in your mental attitude, because the mental attitude is the sort of predisposition of the mind. It's the inclination of the mind. And so the attitude, I'm going to go back to the suttas, because that's, you know, the attitude of Patujana is completely afflicted and intoxicated with craving, which says, you know, something is missing, something needs to be done, I need to do something to get something, be someone to feel good or feel better, I need to, you know, get rid of something that's making me uncomfortable. It's this pendulum of chasing and running away, chasing after and running away from, in order to driven by craving's logic, you know, which so if you wake up in the morning and then you're instantly assaulted by your kids wanting and needing things, and in that moment you think to yourself, I shouldn't have had kids, this is an obstacle to my Buddhist practice, I should have taken on the robes and not had kids, and I would be able to, like, meditate and be satisfied, I'd be able to break this dissatisfaction or whatever, if you even know that that's the problem. Versus you wake up in the morning and you're assaulted by your kids' wants and needs, and you see maybe resistance arising, and you let it go, and you decide to be satisfied and relaxed in that moment, and perform your duties as a parent, be satisfied and relaxed in performing your duties as a parent, and you keep coming back to this attitude of being okay with things as they are, of letting go of dissatisfaction. Then you're turning parenting into a practice, into a meditative practice, in the same way that if a monk is sitting in a monastery, they could wake up in the morning, and I hear this constantly, be asked to join in community activities like chanting or go on tudong together with other monks. And they're like, oh, but I love being alone so much. This is affecting my practice. That's the wrong attitude. That's an attitude of craving still. So you could be a single 25-year-old male in an apartment in a Western society, whatever, in a developed nation, where you got nothing to do but play video games and be completely dissatisfied, or you can be a parent and be completely dissatisfied, or you can be a monk in a monastery and be dissatisfied, or you can be any of those three things and be satisfied. And the difference is your attitude afflicted by craving, or is your attitude in understanding the Four Noble Truths and developing the Noble Eightfold Path, which that second, in following that right view, that second factor of right attitude or right inclination of mind is the attitude traditionally of renunciation. And what you're renouncing is dissatisfaction, greed, hatred, and delusion. It's an internal renunciation, and you have an opportunity in every moment to renounce dissatisfaction as it arises. That's the moment by moment craving. That's the practice of virtue. When the mind becomes clear enough from subduing craving to that point, there's a deepening in your understanding, and but that part of the practice doesn't necessarily need to be talked about, because the part that we're talking about here is what brings about enough mental clarity for it to move forward from there. So I'll say that.
Love it. Thank you. Really, really helpful.
Man.
Yeah.
Awesome, dudes.
All right.
Well,
thank you guys. I always enjoy Dhammarato's calls.
Oh, I love you guys. Thank you so
nice
much.
Contrast to my my wordiness.
That's great.
I love hearing both your perspectives, and I can't always join these calls live, but I'm always listening in, like listening to the recordings and stuff. So really appreciate it. Great stuff.
You're awesome, Thomas. You rock, Ivan. You're awesome, Michael. Thank you for coming. Much peace and love, dudes.
See you later.
Bye, dudes.